In the year 1071, a man found himself a captive of the Seljuk Turkish Sultan Alp Arslan. The battle that had just finished was one of the most consequential of the Middle Ages. Alp Arslan was stunned by the revelation of the identity of the man he now found his prisoner. He confirmed with the other prisoners, as well as his own envoys, that the man in front of him was Romanus Diogenes, Emperor of Rome. This was in the aftermath of the Battle of Manzikert, which would have devastating consequences for the Romans. Alp Arslan treated Romanus with dignity and generosity, which surprised everyone. Both of the men knew that Romanus's future was uncertain, since he had just been betrayed by the second most powerful family in the empire, the Ducai, and by now they had likely claimed the throne for themselves. John Doukas was the brother of the previous emperor Constantine X Doukas and was named Caesar by him. Caesar John, as he was known, was the man who orchestrated the defeat of Romanus, along with his son Andronicus, who commanded the rear guard that betrayed Romanus at Manzikert. Romanus was held for 8 days and then released with promises of friendship and support from the Sultan. Romanus soon learned that a new emperor was crowned in Constantinople, Michael VII. Michael was the nephew of Caesar John, and John had Romanus's wife Eudocia banished to a convent. Caesar John's coup was complete. Romanus now found his situation precarious. Previously, he was known as a dashing and able commander, but his loss at Manzikert and subsequent capture left him a broken man. Most of his army had been paid off by Caesar John to abandon him. Romanus mustered what troops he could and headed for Constantinople, and yet another Roman civil war ensued. The Ducai got the better of Romanus and defeated him. They claimed they would spare his life and send him into exile. But when Romanus made it to Constantinople, John had his eyes gouged out. He was then sent to a monastery, but being in so much agony, he died shortly after. The reign of Michael VII was nothing short of a disaster and has to rank among the worst in Roman history. Complacency, arrogance, and incompetence reduced the empire to a state of chaos from which it never recovered. The situation in the west was bad, with the Norman Robert Guiscard taking all of southern Italy from the Romans. The situation in the east was even worse, with the Turks overrunning most of Anatolia, carving out their own empire, known as the Sultanate of Rome. After Alp Arslan died, his son Malik Shah succeeded him, and this offered some breathing room for the Romans. Since he wasn't interested in warring against Rome, Malik Shah saw his main enemy as the Fatimids in Egypt, and that's where he directed most of his energy. This didn't really help the Romans, since they faced rebellion after rebellion. For years, generals would make a play for the throne until finally a young general named Alexius Komnenos came out as victor. He would be crowned Emperor Alexius I Komnenos in 1081, 10 long years after Manzikert. Alexius was only 24 when he became emperor, but he was already battle-hardened, resourceful, and worthy of the title of emperor, but he was heir to a dying empire. The Turks were in almost complete control of Anatolia, and the Norman Robert Guiscard was now preparing for a major offensive into the Balkans to take Constantinople. Robert Guiscard led a large army into Dyrrhachium, and Alexius had no choice but to face him in battle and suffered a crushing defeat. Most emperors would have given up, but Alexius's hallmarks were his tenacity and political cunning. He persuaded the German Emperor Henry IV to invade Norman Italy, which forced Robert Guiscard to return there, leaving his son Bohemund in charge of the army. Alexius then adopted Turkish strategies and hit and run, and wore the Normans down in the Balkans. Alexius also had a lucky streak, and Robert Guiscard would die of a heart attack in 1085, and the Normans would abandon their campaign. The Normans weren't Alexius's only problem in the Balkans. A group of Turkish nomads called the Pechenegs led a large force south of the Danube and defeated Alexius in battle. They camped outside the walls of Constantinople itself. A Turkish emir named Chaka took the city of Smyrna in the eastern Aegean and started building a navy. He made contact with the Pechenegs and they agreed to a combined attack on the Romans. During the winter of 1090–91, the city of Constantinople was besieged by land by the Pechenegs, while also being attacked at sea by the Turks, and the empire was on the verge of annihilation. A different group of nomads, known as the Cumans, appeared from north of the Danube and was on the verge of joining the Pechenegs until Alexius managed to make contact with them and lavish them with gifts and payments of gold, and he convinced the Cumans to attack the Pechenegs. On the 29th of April 1091, a combined Cuman imperial army decisively defeated the Pechenegs. The threat from Chaka still remained, and he continued to raid the Aegean Islands. A new ambitious Turkish emir, Khalij Arslan, arose and seized Nicaea. Khalij Arslan also married Chaka's daughter, creating a united front to attack the Romans. With Chaka and Khalij Arslan building up their forces in Anatolia and the Aegean, Alexius knew that the lifespan of the empire could be numbered in years, if not months, and had to look somewhere for help. The only place he could look to was the West. A call for help from the West was made difficult by the history of tension between the Pope in Rome and the Patriarch of Constantinople. This resulted in the Great Schism of 1054, which was a formal division of the Eastern and Western churches. On the surface, it was a doctrinal dispute, but in reality, it was a conquest over leadership of Christianity. The schism became less acrimonious after they both found a common enemy in the Normans of southern Italy, and sympathy was also growing due to the increasingly difficult experience of pilgrims going to Jerusalem, which had fallen to the Turks in 1074. From 1091, a campaign of urgent pleas for help went out to noble and royal courts all over Europe, singing of atrocities against Christian property and people. In Venice, lucrative trading contracts were dangled. In France and Germany, Roman diplomats brought gifts of relics for churches, coupled with dire warning of the imperiled state of Christendom in the East. Luckily for Alexius, there was a new pope in Rome, Urban II, who was eager to establish his power over the Eastern Christians, as he called the Romans. Alexius sent an embassy to him begging for help, and they found him in Piacenza in March 1095 and delivered an impassioned plea as recounted by one observer.
An embassy from the Emperor of Constantinople came to the Synod and implored his lordship the Pope and all the faithful to bring assistance against the heathen for the defense of the Holy Church, which had now been nearly annihilated in that region by the infidels who had conquered as far as the walls of Constantinople.
The Pope's response to Alexius would shake the world.